A decorated soldier, Sergeant Marcus Hayes, was mocked on live television, his heroism reduced to a punchline in front of millions. The host, Greg Mallory, with his biting humor and careless arrogance, thought it was funny to belittle a man who had risked everything for others. But Marcus stayed calm, shared the full story of his Medal of Honor-worthy valor, and turned ridicule into a powerful lesson in courage and dignity. Just wait to see how the nation's reaction and Marcus's unwavering strength flipped the script, proving that true respect and justice cannot be ignored. It was a bright Thursday morning, and the Good Morning America studio buzzed with the usual flurry of activity. Cameras swung back and forth, producers barked instructions into headsets, and the teleprompter scrolled its lines in a steady rhythm. Today's segment was meant to celebrate local veterans, a chance to honor their service, share uplifting stories, and provide a moment of pride for viewers at home. Among the guests sat Sergeant Marcus Hayes, a man whose presence quietly demanded attention. At 6'4", with a disciplined posture and a uniform polished to perfection, he exuded a quiet dignity that contrasted with the casual chatter around him. His medals, neatly aligned over his heart, told a story of courage, commitment, and sacrifice. Yet Marcus remained still, offering only a reserved smile to the camera when prompted. Greg Mallory, the host, had built a reputation for quick wit and cutting humor. His laugh was sharp, his commentary often laced with irony, and his smirk suggested he enjoyed the thrill of testing boundaries. He scanned the line of veterans, eyes lingering on Marcus longer than usual. There was a flicker of something almost imperceptible in his expression, a judgment, a flick of condescension masked as amusement. Without hesitation, Greg leaned closer to the camera, his tone light but his words heavy with derision. "Well, folks," he said, his voice carrying the kind of mock surprise that made everyone in the studio lean in, "looks like someone skipped the hero part of the hero story and went straight to the intimidating guy in uniform section." The words landed like stones in water, rippling outward with immediate effect. A few producers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that the humor had crossed an invisible line. The live audience in the studio chuckled, some nervously, while others laughed outright, not fully aware of the weight behind the remark. On screens across the country, viewers felt an instant jolt, a mixture of shock and indignation. Here was a soldier, someone who had stood on foreign soil to protect countless lives, reduced in a single sentence to a stereotype, to a punchline. Marcus felt the sting immediately. The corners of his lips pressed into a firm line, his jaw clenched, and his knuckles whitened around the edge of his jacket, where medals gleamed under the studio lights. The familiar surge of anger rose from deep inside, a flame fanned by years of subtle slights and dismissals, microaggressions that had often gone unchallenged. But this was different. This time it was not whispered behind doors or ignored in passing. It was broadcast to millions, a public affront that carried a weight Marcus could not ignore. He could feel the heat behind his eyes, not tears, but a burning awareness of injustice. It wasn't simply about pride, it was about respect, about recognition for sacrifices made and lives risked. Each medal he wore represented moments of courage, moments when fear and pain were set aside to protect others. Greg's joke stripped all of that away, turning years of service into a spectacle. Marcus's mind raced, cataloging the memories of training, deployments, and the faces of comrades who had trusted him with their lives. The disrespect was almost palpable, tangible enough to make the polished studio lights feel suffocating. Yet beneath the anger was a steady current of control. Marcus had learned long ago that rage could be a tool, but only when channeled with precision. He took a measured breath, letting the heat in his chest simmer without boiling over. Around him, other veterans shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but unsure how to respond. Some muttered under their breath, others cast uneasy glances at the camera. The laughter in the studio continued, but it now sounded hollow, forced. For those watching at home, the contrast was glaring. Here was a man whose valor demanded respect, treated instead as a source of amusement. As Greg leaned back, smiling at his own cleverness, Marcus remained still, a statue of restraint. But inside, anger surged, precise and focused, not destructive, but potent. It was the kind of anger that would not dissipate with a simple apology. It was anger that demanded acknowledgement, that demanded justice. And as the segment moved on, Marcus's eyes held a quiet promise. The story was far from over. The laughter might fill the studio for now, but the truth, like Marcus himself, would not be ignored. The moment the segment ended, Marcus Hayes quietly excused himself and made his way to the Veterans Lounge, a small, dimly lit room tucked behind the studio, lined with worn leather chairs and framed photographs of soldiers in past conflicts. The door closed softly behind him, shutting out the laughter and applause still echoing faintly from the broadcast floor. He sank into one of the chairs, shoulders heavy, eyes fixed on a wall covered with pictures of men and women who had served before him. The room, usually a place of camaraderie and quiet reflection, now felt suffocating, as though the weight of every unspoken insult and unfair judgment he had endured had pooled into this single moment. Images and memories surged unbidden through his mind. The dusty roads of Afghanistan, the tense patrols through narrow alleyways in Iraq, nights under a dark sky punctuated by the distant crackle of gunfire, all the experiences that had shaped him, that had demanded courage beyond measure, pressed down with renewed intensity. Faces of comrades lost in the line of duty appeared before him, their voices echoing in fragments of memory. Each medal pinned to his chest was more than a symbol. It was a testament to lives saved, missions completed, and trust upheld under impossible circumstances. And now, in a brief, careless joke, it had all been reduced to a punchline, a cheap caricature of who he was. Marcus reached for his phone, unable to resist the pull of curiosity and dread, and saw the clips circulating online. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, some ignorant, some malicious, others merely oblivious. The joke had traveled far beyond the studio walls, igniting conversations tinged with subtle and not-so-subtle bias. "Intimidating guy in uniform," someone had typed, echoing Greg's words, with laughing emojis trailing behind it. Another comment questioned why Marcus, a black man, was even being highlighted in a segment meant to honor veterans. The sting was sharp, not just because of the insult itself, but because the world seemed to confirm it in real time, with thousands of strangers nodding along or laughing at his expense. Pain, Marcus realized, was no longer an isolated sensation. It radiated outward, touching every connection he had forged in service. His fellow veterans reached out, sending messages of support and concern, some with gentle humor to lighten the moment, others with genuine worry. "You don't deserve this," wrote Lieutenant Jackson, a man who had fought beside him in countless missions. Sergeant Ramirez called, voice low and steady, offering reminders of Marcus's accomplishments and the truth that no one's joke could erase. Yet, even with their support, Marcus felt a gnawing emptiness, a hollow space where pride and recognition should have thrived. The injustice was compounded by the cruel irony that he had fought for a country that now seemed eager to dismiss him. He had risked his life, endured hardship, and faced unimaginable challenges, yet here, in his homeland, his honor was questioned not for his actions, but for the color of his skin. The medals, once a source of quiet satisfaction, now felt almost like weights, tokens of effort disregarded. Pain was not just personal, it was communal, a reflection of a system that too often allowed respect to be contingent on appearances rather than deeds. Marcus leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the silence of the lounge fill him. The anger that had flared earlier simmered into a deep ache, a sorrow tempered by reflection. Each breath he took carried the weight of his experiences, the burden of recognition denied, and the knowledge that he was seen, in this instance, only through the lens of stereotype. And yet, even in this profound discomfort, a quiet determination began to form at the edges of his consciousness. Pain, he realized, was only the beginning, the spark that would ignite the need for truth, for acknowledgement, for justice. He opened his eyes, staring at the framed photographs on the wall, and for the first time since the segment aired, he felt a sense of clarity. The humiliation would not define him. The story would continue, and Marcus Hayes, with all he had endured and achieved, would not be reduced to a momentary joke. By the next morning, Marcus Hayes had slept little, though his body lay still beneath the quiet hum of his apartment. The events of the previous day lingered, heavy and insistent, yet a subtle shift had begun. The producer of Good Morning America, sensing the growing backlash and the wave of public criticism, had called Marcus directly. They requested another interview segment, this time longer and more focused, a chance for him to speak for himself, to share his story unfiltered. When Marcus listened to the offer, he felt no rush of anger, no desire for immediate vindication. Instead, there was clarity. This was not an opportunity for revenge, nor a moment to humiliate Greg Mallory, the host who had mocked him. It was a chance to present truth, to replace derision with understanding, and to let courage speak louder than laughter. He agreed, aware that millions would be watching, but determined to approach the segment with calm, precision, and dignity. In the studio, the lights blazed as the cameras rolled. Greg, seemingly oblivious to the storm his earlier comments had caused, opened with a half-smile, ready to resume his usual brand of humor. "So, Marcus," he began, leaning toward the camera as if to coax a reaction, "how does it feel to be the, intimidating guy again?" The words hung in the air, intended to provoke, but Marcus's reaction was measured. He did not flinch, did not falter. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his uniform crisp, medals gleaming under the studio lights. His voice was steady, resonant, and deliberate. "I've had the honor of serving alongside some of the finest people this country has ever known," Marcus began. "I've faced situations where decisions mattered not just for me, but for the lives of others. I've been entrusted with the safety of my team, and I've acted in ways that earned the Medal of Honor. That medal represents countless moments of courage, sacrifice, and responsibility." He paused, letting the words settle. The weight behind them was palpable. "It's easy to make jokes when you don't know the story behind the uniform, the work behind the medals, the lives behind the service." For a moment, the studio was entirely silent. The usual hum of cameras, the soft shuffling of notes, even Greg's habitual smirk seemed to fade into stillness. The audience, both in the studio and at home, was drawn in by the quiet authority Marcus exuded. Each medal over his heart glinted like a silent testament, a visual reminder of bravery Greg had casually reduced to a punchline. The contrast was stark, impossible to ignore. Viewers felt the shift immediately, a flicker of hope that truth could counter ridicule, that integrity and courage could reclaim the narrative. Greg's expression began to change. The smirk that had come so easily the day before wavered, then faltered. His eyes, for the first time that morning, met Marcus's steady gaze, and the realization dawned. He had not insulted just a man on television. He had mocked a hero, a Medal of Honor recipient whose actions had safeguarded lives in circumstances few could even imagine. The laughter and bravado evaporated, replaced by a subtle, uncomfortable acknowledgement. Marcus continued, calm but firm, outlining the critical missions he had undertaken, the lives saved through careful decisions, the courage required not for spectacle, but for duty. With each sentence, the atmosphere in the studio shifted. Hope spread, not a naive hope, but one grounded in recognition. Viewers sensed the injustice of the previous day and saw, finally, the man behind the uniform, disciplined, heroic, and unshakable in his dignity. By the time the segment ended, the room felt different. Cameras captured Marcus as more than a figure on a screen. They captured the embodiment of honor and integrity. Greg sat back, quiet now, confronted not by anger or confrontation, but by undeniable truth. Across living rooms and mobile screens, people who had laughed yesterday now watched with awareness, admiration, and a sense of collective hope that courage could still be recognized, that respect could be restored. The final segment began with a tension that was almost tangible. Greg Mallory, once so quick with his wit, now appeared subdued. His earlier confidence had dissipated like smoke, leaving behind only awkwardness and a stammered attempt at apology. "Marcus, I didn't realize—" His words trailed off, heavy with discomfort, as he struggled to articulate what he had done wrong. On screen, the apology was sincere in intent but hollow in execution, a fragile acknowledgement of wrongdoing compared to the steadfast presence of the man seated across from him. Marcus, however, offered no visible satisfaction, no hint of triumph in his expression. He simply sat tall, posture unyielding, eyes calm, his uniform immaculate, medals catching the studio lights. There was no need for vengeance. His dignity alone conveyed the weight of justice. The cameras panned across Marcus as he recounted the moments that had earned him the Medal of Honor, the lives he had protected, and the countless hours of service that had gone unseen by the casual observer. He did not dwell on Greg's mocking comment. Instead, he transformed the moment into a lesson, a demonstration of courage and commitment. His voice was measured, resonant with authority and quiet pride. The words carried a clarity that resonated far beyond the studio, reaching millions of viewers who paused their morning routines to listen. Social media erupted almost instantly. Clips of Marcus speaking circulated widely, shared not for humor, but for admiration. Hashtags praising his bravery, integrity, and calm resilience began trending. Discussions about respect for veterans and acknowledgement of their sacrifices surged across news outlets and comment sections alike. In the studio, the reaction was palpable. Colleagues and producers whispered in muted tones, visibly impressed by the way Marcus had reclaimed the narrative. Greg, once the center of attention, was now a secondary figure in a story defined by honor, not humor. Marcus had turned humiliation into education, mockery into admiration, and an awkward morning segment into a lesson in dignity. The true triumph was not in forcing an apology, but in demonstrating, with quiet strength, the difference between superficial amusement and lasting respect. As the cameras powered down, Marcus stood. The studio crew, moved by what they had witnessed, offered handshakes and nods of respect. But it was the arrival of his fellow veterans that brought a deeper sense of fulfillment. Men and women who had shared trenches, training grounds, and the challenges of deployment approached him with genuine warmth. Lieutenant Jackson clapped him on the back, Sergeant Ramirez offered a firm handshake, and others exchanged smiles of acknowledgement and quiet pride. Marcus felt the subtle but profound validation that comes not from public praise alone, but from those who truly understood the weight of what had been endured. Stepping into the bright sunlight outside the studio, Marcus took a moment to breathe. The city hummed with its usual rhythm, unaware in most places of the small but significant victory that had unfolded. Yet, for those who had watched, there was a shift in perception, a renewed sense of awareness about the sacrifices of veterans, the respect they deserved, and the courage that often goes unseen. Marcus walked with measured steps, grounded in the knowledge that he had not only endured personal insult, but had elevated the conversation, reminding a nation of values too often taken for granted. The story concluded not with retribution, not with anger, but with inspiration. A man who had faced war, bias, and public ridicule stood unbroken, a living testament to perseverance, courage, and integrity. For viewers, it was more than a televised segment. It was a reminder that true heroism cannot be reduced to a joke, and that dignity, once claimed and maintained, commands respect that no laughter can erase. Marcus Hayes, in quiet strength and unshakable resolve, became not just a veteran on a screen, but a symbol of hope, courage, and the enduring power of character.